Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Porter. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and I practice in Gainesville, Florida. I do live therapy, personal, private, in my office. If you want to come see me and you can travel to Gainesville, Florida, please look me up online and you'll find my contact information. Today, I'm going to try to help you learn the beginnings of how to stop self-sabotage and stop self-stopping. A lot of times you want to do something, you want to find a way to improve your life, and you know what to do, but you just don't do it. A lot of times you even forget what you wanted to do. Your whole plan goes up in smoke. There is a reason why that happens, and there's a reason I can show to you why you can make that process stop so that you are doing what you choose to do and getting the results you want to get. There's no such thing as a perfect life, but you and the rest of us can do way, way better. I'm going to give you a breakdown of the nervous system and then explain to you why this helps and why it happens. First, I'm going to explain something a long time ago that happened. We had something called a behavioral psychology breakthrough. B.F. Skinner decided and found and proved that you can train animals to do just about anything by giving them a system of punishments and rewards or withdrawing the punishments and rewards. And everybody was so excited about it that it became the way to do therapy. But then when we tried to apply it to human beings, we found out it didn't work as well. You can teach a dog to do just about anything. You can teach a pigeon to play ping pong. But it's very difficult to train people with such straight methods as punish and reward. There's a lot more going on with this. I'm going to give a simple breakdown of the nervous system and give a simple explanation of how you can orient yourself to blow past your roadblocks. Okay, so obviously, possibly, NS. NS up here stands for nervous system. That is your whole nervous system. You break that down into two parts and you get your central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, and your peripheral nervous system, which is everything else. So you break everything else down in this way under some paradigms. This is a neurological breakdown of the peripheral nervous system. It breaks down into the musculoskeletal nervous system, or also called the voluntary nervous system. This is the stuff you have under control, like, look, I can do that. Isn't that amazing? The autonomic nervous system, or the involuntary nervous system, obviously, is the stuff you can't control. So an example is this system controls your heart, liver, lungs, kidneys. Now I'm going to go down here and explain a little more and then go right back up to the autonomic nervous system and the musculoskeletal nervous system, because this is where it's happening. The desire to do something and the fact that you wind up stopping yourself. All right, so if you want to break down the autonomic nervous system, this is the one that's basically out of your control, and I'll prove to you in a second that it's not completely out of your control. There are situations in which it is and situations in which it isn't. All right, so you break it down and you've got the sympathetic nervous systems. I'm not pointing at it right, but it has to do with tweaking you up. Fight or flight. You know what fight or flight is, but it also helps you fawn. Fawn means you're constantly massaging the social situation and people pleasing to keep yourself out of danger, because this system is often about danger. It takes over your body when somehow it judges you're in danger. The problem is this system was trained a long time ago when you were a kid and you didn't have as much of your voluntary nervous system intact. And let me explain that in a second. All right, you've got your parasympathetic nervous system. That's why I put PSNS here, because this is your peripheral nervous system. This is your parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system does the opposite as the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system gets you tweaked and ready to act. You can kill, you can run, you can do all kinds of things that are intended for emergency, dangerous stuff. But it also controls and regulates your sort of internal organs and your body temperature and your blood pressure and those sort of things. The peripheral nervous system is powerful enough to knock you out. A lot of people think that happened to George W. Bush during his presidency when he happened to get a peanut lodged in his throat. And what happens is that there's something called the vagus nerve up there, and that's associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. And if you stimulate that enough just by, say, choking on something, or I'll give an example that happens to a lot of people, some paramedics told me, is when you're bearing down to go to the bathroom, like to take a crap I'm talking about. If you bear down, you might stimulate that vagus nerve, which stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system to the extreme, and you can actually pass out on the floor. This system is thought to actually do something that we didn't think humans did before. But we find out that humans do something that we used to call playing possum, which is when some kind of predator comes along, you just collapse on the ground, and a lot of your vital signs kind of go down to being less measurable or less detectable without instruments. So how that even developed evolutionarily is thought to be that when a bear comes up to you or a tiger and finds you passed out, you will not seem to its nervous system as a safe bet for eating, because for all it knows, you've been lying there for a while and you're full of bacteria that are going to kill it. So that process evolved out of that paradigm. But let me tell you the other thing. When I mentioned fight, flight, or fawn here, there's also another F called freeze. So have you ever found yourself just going blank, dissociating from a memory, not knowing what to say to somebody when they've said something to you, having a brilliant brain that suddenly shuts off in the middle of an important interaction? Well, this may be the parasympathetic nervous system in action. So now you know what these two do. We're going to combine them together and talk about the autonomic nervous system, which is not only there to run your normal processes without you even paying attention to it. They are unconscious. Unconscious nervous system, conscious nervous system. The thing about the autonomic nervous system is it helps you do some things that are extremely behavioral, musculoskeletal. Imagine learning how to juggle. You can't just juggle by thinking about each ball and everywhere it's dropping. So after you've gotten good at it, your hands are just doing it. It's hard not to catch something, in fact. Driving, you could be talking to someone, flipping the radio, and you're still pressing on the gas and the brake pedal, and you don't even really recognize that you're doing it. Or a car starts lurching towards you, and before you can actually think, you're jerking the wheel. So it can lead to a lot of good, positive, important, and life-saving automatic reactions that actually bypass your conscious brain or hit your spinal cord and get you moving before you even recognize something happening. For example, if you hear a loud bang, your head will jerk before you realize, a split second before you realize that you've heard a noise. So this actually, in times of perceived danger, will take over the rest of the system. And your brain works by directing resources to the parts that are active. So if your autonomic nervous system is overacting, it's going to shut down some things associated with the musculoskeletal nervous system, the voluntary nervous system. And the main part I want to talk about to you today, or just bring up to you today, is the prefrontal cortex. That is the part of the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe and the prefrontal cortex are thought of to be mediators and actors upon happiness, impulse control, choice behavior, planning, and follow-through, and other what we call executive functions like that. It's almost like the boss brain. It's almost like the brain that you think you are. So when I decide to do something, that's kind of the brain you're thinking of. Or when I know what I want and I know how to get it, but I don't do it. The part that knows what you want and knows how to get it, that's your prefrontal cortex, your frontal lobe, highly sophisticated areas. But the problem is, and there's more to it than that, but let's just break it down to that. The prefrontal cortex and the autonomic nervous system. But the problem is that this autonomic nervous system was trained way back before this prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobe completely. The prefrontal cortex is the skin of thick neural connections on the front and outside, and cortex means skin, of your frontal lobe. Your frontal lobe kind of goes way back here, you know. So that's your thinking brain. That's your sort of what you think of as your me brain. But I will tell you that if you put your hand on a hot stove, before your mean brain knows it, your hand is already jerked away. And about 2 seconds later, you might start to feel the pain and start to realize what you had just done. Put your hand on a hot stove. So that's how it works. That's why you are sometimes doing something that you need to be doing without deciding to do it. And then secondly, why sometimes you are not doing something you need to be doing without deciding to not do it. Because in a situation of danger, this thing will flood you with behaviors. How do I do this? With behaviors, with thoughts and emotions, all designed to get you to do what it wants you to do. And since it was developed when you were a toddler, it's basically got the mind of a toddler. And it needs a parent. And guess who the parent is? You. And in a sense, a manner of speaking which is not accurate at all. But we're going to use this for now. Who are you? Who's the parent you? That's your voluntary nervous system, especially your forebrain, especially your prefrontal cortex. So, what very, very good cognitive behavioral and emotion-based counselors do is they get you to start to build a relationship between your forebrain, your prefrontal cortex, and your autonomic nervous system. Other things we talk about is the ancient brain, the limbic system, the lizard brain, the monkey mind. There are other ways of talking about these systems, not all of them synonymous, but all talking about sort of the animal mind. So in a situation where you're trying to train a dog, your forebrain would be representing you, and the dog would be, we're going to use analogies. One is you can think of it as your animal brain, another one, the autonomic nervous system will be your animal brain, or you could consider it your toddler brain. And what do you have to do with a toddler to get it in shape and to get you back in shape to be an appropriate parent? First, or you may have to, you do have to stop obeying it, which is excruciating, which means sometimes you're going to do things that a part of you knows you need to do, even though it may be a very dim voice inside your system, and you're going to try to get that voice to speak in the face of everything else inside you telling you to not do something that you're about to do. For example, if you want to ask a person out on a date and everything is screaming at you to stop, and your legs are shaking and going cold, and your armpits are starting to sweat, and your mind is being told by your autonomic nervous system that you are going to embarrass yourself, and it's going to get around town and eventually get around the internet that you're worthless, and you're never going to have a date in your life, and you're going to die alone with no companions at age 73 and a half. You know that the part that wants you to do something that a few minutes ago you thought was sensible is probably your forebrain, your musculoskeletal nervous system, your voluntary nervous system, and that the other part is your child brain, your toddler brain. And it's going to try to boss you around. It's going to try to bully you into doing whatever it thinks it needs to get you to do to feel safe. But you realize, I think, from this explanation, that its safety measures actually often decrease your safety. For example, let's say you're trying to do a job search and you're having trouble motivating yourself to do it. The part that's demotivating you is best thought of as your autonomic nervous system, and the part that's still wanting to go do it is the voluntary nervous system. And one thing I want to say is you want to do a lot of this with a therapist in a safe environment, because it's better to have somebody out who's got their forebrain completely on to guide you through the process. But you can also do some of this alone. You can tell yourself and that system, listen, I know that things seem dangerous, but sometimes because of the way you were brought up, you're talking to your toddler brain now, the way you were brought up, you think things are dangerous when they're not. But I'm here to tell you when they really are dangerous and what it's important to go do. So for example, looking for a job, scary as hell for most of us. That's because our little toddler brain is very worried about what happens if it puts itself out there, puts you out there, that you're going to be shamed, humiliated, perhaps abused by asserting who you are. But what really happens is the forebrain knows that the more you assert yourself, say out in the job market, the more likely you are to get a job that you absolutely want with very good pay. So you've got to take this person and support it and use it to talk to this person. But you also have to let this musculoskeletal nervous system retake charge of the muscle and the skeleton and everything else you do behavior with. And this one's going to try to grab you by the legs and pull you back, but you're going to disobey. And so the two things you're going to do is learn to disobey this, because it becomes a bully. It becomes a bullying toddler. And you're going to have to try to remember to start to identify with this and say, I'm going to do this. Another way you could think of this is Sheriff Andy Taylor from the old Andy Griffith Show. And this is Barney Fife. Barney Fife was always overreacting, but eventually you're going to become Sheriff Andy Taylor, who forces Andy to put his bullet in his pocket and not in his pistol, and tell Barney, that it's going to do what it needs to do the way you tell it to do. And over time, you will train this system to listen, and you will train this system to speak on its decisions and act on its decisions. And this will be getting, as you practice this system will start to get more blood flow and neural growth hormone to the prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobe. And it will physically grow in density and weight inside your head. And this one may shrink back down to side, because as you divert resources to this one, you bring resources away from this one. And so the one you feed is the one that grows. Now, don't be afraid that this one is going to just deteriorate, because you're going to need that one actually to get you out of burning buildings, to save a life in the midst of a car accident, to calm yourself down sometimes, because like I said, this autonomic nervous system doesn't just calm you down by making you faint. It actually can be harnessed to chill yourself out. You can send signals by choosing, for instance, to do deep breathing. And this takes deep breathing as a sign that we can calm down now. That's just an example. So I encourage you to read more up on this, talk about your successes with this kind of self-change, and perhaps find yourself a therapist in your area to really catapult and supercharge and turbo boost what you can do for yourself. Again, I'm Jim Porter. I'm a therapist in Gainesville. If you live near enough to Gainesville to travel to me on a regular basis, look me up on the web and you'll find easy contact information. Otherwise, leave some comments about some successes you've had and some struggles you've had trying to get your self-stopping and self-sabotage under control. Thank you very much.